Thank you for listening to Permission Granted. I'm your host, Juliette Ricci Lagman. Today we have with us Adam Carbary. Adam is an intuitive coach, somatic breathwork practitioner, and instructor, and Reiki teacher. Welcome, Adam.
Hi, thank you, Juliet, for having me.
Thank you for being here. So tell me a little about yourself.
So it's as you noted, I am a intuitive coach, a breathwork instructor and practitioner, a Reiki master and teacher, also just a spiritual seeker. I discovered all of these modalities in a search for just my own personal healing, overcoming childhood traumas, overcoming relationship wounds, overcoming limiting beliefs, self-doubts, all of the kind of stuff that I think many people that are listening to your podcast are also in the same journey. And so
Yeah.
it's really just over the years. I want to say my journey really started back in about 2009. And it's just always been this pursuit. I recently, my wife and I have this kind of card game that we do to connect with one another. And it has all of these random questions. And one of the questions was, if you had to give your life a title, what would it be? And
Oh my
in,
gosh.
instantly, the thought came the pursuit of consciousness.
Oh, I love that. Let's pause there for 1 second. That's incredible. Wow. Okay, tell me more about that.
So, really, I have the firm belief, and I am a spiritual person, not religious in any way, shape, or form. I like to say love is my religion and nature is my church. And
Mm,
so, for me, everything is consciousness. We all come from consciousness. Every living thing, every non mobile thing, everything that we see in our reality is a spark of that same consciousness. So, this idea of the pursuit of consciousness is not only to learn myself in the deepest way that I possibly can, but also to see myself in every other thing and every other person that I work with. So, in
yeah.
my work of coaching, in my work of breath work, I look at it as I am helping myself by helping other people.
Yes. Yeah, I can attest to that. That is what I'm finding with this podcast, that, just going on this authentic, true path, and of course, writing that it's healing me very quickly. And I get to share it with everybody. I mean, it's amazing. So, yes, I can attest to that.
We have this saying and I think this just applies to any modality that you're working with, whether your modality is your podcast, whether your modality is writing, whether it's breathwork, whether it's Reiki, whether it's yoga. Every time we give a session, we receive a session.
Oh, wow. Wow. And I'm so used to the world of giving, and you deplete your energy. But if you're in your true calling, that's not the case, right?
Exactly. And
Wow,
and
that's
even
amazing.
I always look at it and I have this little prayer that I go through every single time that I hold space, and it's to set my ego and personality aside
Mm.
so that this consciousness can stream through for the best healing of that individual, whatever that ends up looking like. And so
Mhm.
really it's when I work with people, it's not about me. It's not about my ego. It's not about an agenda
Right.
that I have for people. It's truly stepping away from the fix it mentality and
Oh,
that fix
wow.
it mentality that our society and Western medicine has, that you are broken and let me give you something that will fix you.
Hmm.
But none of
Yes.
us are broken. We are all whole, but maybe we are just missing some
Hmm.
pieces of selves. I think we lose these parts of ourselves when we experience stressful times or traumatic times, but we also lose these part of ourselves when, especially in childhood, we show up authentically as we truly are. And then somebody
Hmm.
says, no, don't be that way.
Yep. Yeah.
Shush,
Yeah.
quiet down. No, don't say that. And
Yeah.
that tells our soul that is projecting through this physical manifestation of ourselves that that's not okay. It's not okay for us to be truly
Mhm.
authentic. So it's almost like that piece of us checks out. And I truly
Yes.
believe that's really what this spiritual journey is all about. It's reclaiming and remembering all of those parts of ourselves so we can
Yes.
become that true, authentic version. And I think the year of 2025 is the year of authenticity. It's also the year in the
Oh,
Chinese zodiac of the wood snake. And what do
yeah.
snakes do when their skin no longer fits? They shed
They
it.
shed
They
it.
shed what no
Exactly.
longer serves. And so this year it's like you can see it within social media, and I can see it in all of the recent posts that I've been making talking about just being your true authentic self. Those are the ones that
Yes.
people really resonate with. Those are the ones that get the most engagement because that's what people want.
Hmm.
People want to
Yeah.
just be able to be themselves. They don't want to have to fit into a box anymore. They don't want to have to be just like so and so or, live this certain life when maybe that life isn't in alignment with how your soul is actually wanting to project itself onto the world.
Yes, I was having this discussion with my husband yesterday. I said, honey, I think I figured it out. It's the fact that in our culture, we don't aren't allowed to be vulnerable. And so creating these spaces where we can be vulnerable is really important. And I said, is it the cool factor, that we have this thing about being cool in America or whatever you want to call it? I said, I think that it is a little bit of I'm better than you or competition. That's the other thing was the competition piece. And it's like if we could just get back to the cooperation instead of the competition and understand that we are all equal, every single being, then it would get rid of a huge amount of our problems.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's one of the challenges with social media is social media inherently is this competitive space where we
Yeah.
start comparing somebody else's life to our life and then we feel like, man, I wish I was there or I wish I had that fancy house or that nice car or all of the money in the bank or to be able to go on all of these vacations. But
Yeah.
little do people know many of these influencers rent that house for the day, rent the car for the day.
Mm.
AI impose themselves to look like they're on a vacation. So
Yeah.
a lot of times we are comparing ourselves to this supposed glorious life when in
Yeah.
all actuality that life isn't really true. They're just doing it for the likes and the views.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're happy with your life, if you're happy exactly with where you are, it doesn't matter how many likes and views you get.
Hmm. Very true. And isn't it just if you are feeling broken or having the jealousy or whatever the comparison, isn't it just a perception shift that needs to take place, like basically just switch the way you're viewing things.
Yeah, sometimes it is that perspective shift, but also it's the realization that every single person, every single instance, every challenge you have in your life is a mirror. It's
Yeah.
showing you where in yourself you are not free.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And I experienced that and we can talk about this more later, but I'll just jump in. When I worked with you and hired you to work with me on breath work for a session, and that was I don't know how else to say it, but the best money I ever spent. Like it just got to the heart of who I am and where I should be going. And it was just amazing. And I know we did a few sessions, but within, gosh, how long was our session? An hour or so?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, amazing, amazing shifts.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
beautiful what can come about and that's why I love breathwork as a modality so much. And like we touched on, I have other modalities that I work with and they all have their time and a place depending upon where somebody's at in their journey.
Yeah.
But breathwork is a really powerful tool mainly because you are meeting yourself with the most powerful tool that you have ever been given, and that is your breath. The
Wow.
very first thing we do when we come into this life is take a breath. And the very
Yes.
last thing we do when we exit this life is take a breath.
So I want to go down this path of breath work. First of all, how did you find breath work?
Mm. So this is a fun journey, and we'll take a little bit of rewind back to 2018. And in 2017, my wife and I I was going through kind of some struggles in just our life. We had a beautiful home here in Snohomish, Washington. I think at that point we had 4 different cars. I was running a
Mm,
home theater installation business. Outside looking in, I was living the perfect life, and I was
yeah.
more miserable than I had ever been.
Mm,
And I had found myself into a deep addiction with cannabis where I was smoking all day, every day. I was a highly functional stoner. Most people that would meet me, especially the people that I was working with, and granted, I never smoked when I knew I had to work because I was
yeah.
working in multi-million-dollar homes. I didn't want a chance doing anything wrong. But as soon as I got home, I was hitting the bong or the volcano or smoking a joint. And I was just numbing out, feeling this like, this is this it? I feel
Mm,
like I've achieved the American dream, and yet I feel empty. I feel
wow.
like if this is what the rest of my life is going to be like, I don't know if I want to continue doing this. I don't know if I
Yeah.
want to continue being here. And
Yeah.
so this was the first, now that I know, dark night of the soul that I was experiencing. And actually, it probably wasn't the first. It was the first time I was consciously aware of the experience of the dark night of the soul, of
Hmm.
entering into a space of my very being where I was being met with my shadow and I did not like what I saw.
Yeah.
And this began to manifest into struggles within my relationship, struggles within my job, struggles within, trying to find some semblance of purpose. And
Hmm.
so we made the decision, we were starting to look into how could we get out of this constant need to do this job that I wasn't feeling fulfilled in. And we started looking at tiny houses, and I started doing the calculations, and I was like, okay, I got to buy the trailer, I got to buy all the materials, and then I got to buy the truck to tow it. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that's more than what we have the budget for at the time. We had a very minimal amount of savings set up. And I was talking with a gentleman at a psychic fair that I ended up going to where I was vending some orgonite pieces that I was creating at the time. And he was talking about converting a school bus. I was like, well, that sounds interesting. And so I started looking at schoolies on social
Mm.
media. And September 2017, we bought a 37-foot school bus for $10,000. It was delivered to our house, still had all of the seats, was still
Oh
school
my God.
bus yellow. It was from the Renton School District here in Washington that had just been retired. And I spent the next 11 months converting it, during which I had 3 major mental breakdowns
Oh my
of
gosh.
trying to work full time, trying to convert this bus, trying to pay all of the bills, trying to still have a social life, trying to still have a relationship, trying to appease my family and friends.
Yeah.
And I had realized I had met my maximum. I had pushed myself to the true limits. And so
Yeah.
during that process, I ended up watching a documentary called Sacred Science by Nick Polizzi, where he
Mm.
followed 8 people going down to the Amazon rainforest to a center called Paititi Institute. Roman Hannis is the facilitator that is there. And so after watching that documentary, I ordered the book. As everything that gets transitioned to, video media, the book is always
Yeah.
better and goes into more detail. I literally finished that book, closed it at 11:30 at night, and I will never forget this. I opened up my laptop, I went to Paititi Institute, and I booked for the very next 10-day intensive retreat.
Oh my gosh. That's wild.
Little did I know that by the time we finished the bus, by the time we sold all of our things, I sold all of our cars, we sold our house, we sold everything that wouldn't fit into that bus. We got into that bus, drove 7 days straight to Boston, Massachusetts, where my wife's dad lives. I dropped her and the bus off, and I hopped on a plane to Peru for 2 weeks.
Wow. That's incredible.
First time ever traveling solo internationally. And it was an eye-opening experience. I didn't speak any Spanish. I tried to communicate as best as I could with the people that are down there. Thankfully, if you've traveled internationally, most people in international countries, they learn English, so they at least can speak somewhat broken English. And I stayed with a host family in a town called Pisac for the first couple of days to get acclimated to the altitude. And one day I hiked up to these ruins above this town, and once you get up to the ruins, it's like 11,000 feet. I would walk for about 100 yards and then I'd have to stop. I'd have to catch my breath because not being acclimated to that high of altitude, it really took a toll on my body. But I remember
Yeah.
sitting on the roof of one of these ancient structures and feeling like, okay, this is it. Like, if I can't figure something out in this trip, then when I get back, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Mm.
And then I entered into this 10-day retreat. And really, full honesty, I went to this retreat to experience ayahuasca. I did not know that I was going to be experiencing breathwork during this retreat. And so the retreat opened up with a beautiful, opening ceremony. And then the next night was a ayahuasca ceremony. And that ceremony was very eye-opening. I met a lot of different aspects of myself. I had to do a lot of forgiveness throughout that ceremony.
Mm.
And then we had an integration day, and then we had a ceremony with Huachuma, which is San Pedro, the cousin to peyote. And then we had another integration day. And then the next 2 days were the most powerful days of that entire retreat. And they were the days with breathwork.
Oh, wow.
We connected to the medicine of cacao, and then we had breath work. And this breath work, they were like 2 hour long experiences, way more intense than the type of breath work that I do, somatic breath work. It was all about clearing out all of the things that no longer serve.
Hmm.
And in that very first session, I relived memories from 2, 3, and 4 years old that really showed me these deep-seated beliefs that were handed down from my father that
Hmm.
really shaped how I began to show up throughout the rest of my life. And I experienced the worst tetany that I'd ever experienced. My hands completely cramped up into like
Yeah.
these like lobster claws, T-Rex arms, where I physically could not move my arms. I was stuck in that position, and it was terrifying.
Mm.
Granted, Roman prepared us that that was going to be a possibility during it. And as I was experiencing that, he came over with a drum and was banging it over me, trying to help this energy move through my body. But I was resisting.
Ooh.
I was resisting the experience of my physical body saying I'm holding on to something really tightly that I needed to let go of.
Mm.
And finally, in just this moment of, you know what? I've resisted. I've tried to open my hands as much as I could. I've tried to force this experience. I'm just going to surrender to it. And in
Oh,
that
wow.
moment of surrendering, I broke. I just started bawling my head off. I let out all of these feelings that I hadn't allowed myself to feel for a really, really long time. And I was met with tremendous amounts of bliss,
Oh,
tremendous
wow.
amounts of love for myself, love for my family, love for all of the people that had hurt me and helped me throughout my journey.
Hmm.
You know, those of you that maybe are listening to this and you yourself, Juliette, may hear some of these
Hmm.
same words that I shared during a breathwork session because those moments were so powerful and transformative for me that I left that retreat a completely different person.
Wow.
And I spent from that moment on trying to find a way of being able to learn this beautiful modality for myself so that I could share it with others. And I didn't have the time nor the finances to continue to travel back to Peru to actually
Mhm.
learn that specific type of breath work that's called primordial breath work. Incredibly powerful experience. But fast forward to December of 2021, and I sat through my very first somatic breathwork session with the founder, Stephen Jaggers.
Okay.
And I knew immediately after that session that this was it. This was the modality that I had been searching for ever since that retreat in Peru. And so I signed
Wow.
up for the very first online training that he offered. And, now I have been in relation with somatic breathwork for almost 3 years. It was
Wow.
actually 3 years this January that I started that particular training. And now I'm a mentor and an instructor. I
Yeah.
hold sessions here locally in many different studios. Actually, it looks like you recently interviewed Chelsea from Wildwood Studio,
Yep.
which was the very first studio that invited me to come in and hold it for
Wow.
their community. And so I have a really, really special place in my heart for Chelsea and Wildwood Yoga Studio because it's just
Yeah.
such a beautiful space, beautiful community. And I truly believe breathwork is one of those modalities that truly can give us that glimpse of who
Yeah.
we are before all the stress and trauma, who we were before our parents, society, and life told us who we should be.
Yes, and it's such a fast track. And the fact that you have the audio background, you tailor make playlists to your clients to make this amazing, intense experience. And also you do that in the workshop world as well, in the workshop setting and class setting. But it's pretty incredible. Yeah.
Thank you. That's one of my favorite parts about the breathwork experience because yeah, I am guiding it with gentle words for myself, but for the most part, the journey is guided by the playlist. And
Yeah.
I cultivate the playlists in such a way where it's almost like a roller coaster. Like each song builds upon itself in the first half that we call the clearing round, where
Mm,
we're we're triggering our sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight system, because we can't change anything except from the original state that it was created. So
yeah.
when we create these blockages and limiting beliefs within our body that get stored within our body, due to us being in that sympathetic state, we need to enter into that state so that we can allow that body to, that energy to fully release itself from our body.
Hmm.
Then we go into that second half, which we've always referred to as the repatterning phase, because it's an opportunity for us to be able to choose new patterns, choose new ways of being. But recently, I've relayed to the team that I feel like we need to rename these to the remembering phases
Oh,
because
okay.
we are truly remembering ourself. And
Hmm.
when we can use the word respire, right? When we breathe, we are respiring, but we are respiriting.
Hmm.
If we want to
Yeah.
use entomology and kind of break down that word, is we are breathing our spirit back into ourself in that second half. We are bringing
So,
all the parts of ourselves that may have disconnected at certain points back in so we can enter into the space of a living wholeness.
yes, and that is sort of forgive me for saying this, sort of the end goal or, the symptom of, breath work. In a nutshell, like a definition, just to back up a little bit, can you tell the audience exactly what breath work is?
Yeah, so breathwork really is, and breathwork has been around for thousands and thousands of years. There's many different types of breathwork, but the reason we call it breath work is because we are using the breath to do work within our body. And
Okay.
we can use the breath, such as like a Wim Hof breath, where a lot of people use this certain type of breathing to basically bring their body into a state of balance so that they can enter in like a cold plunge or a sauna. They can do really
Yes.
hard and difficult things. But the type of breath work that I do, somatic breath work, really focuses on the body, disengaging our mind, and really helps us to tap into our physical state of self, taps
Okay.
into the areas in our body that have become stagnant, that we've disconnected from, that we haven't really allowed ourselves to feel. And I
Yeah.
like to use the analogy of when we enter into this life, we put on a backpack, and this
Mm,
backpack's empty. And as we experience stressful or traumatic things, it's almost like it puts a rock in that backpack.
hmm.
And if we never take a moment to take that backpack off and look inside of it to what we're carrying, but we just keep carrying it, eventually that backpack gets heavier and heavier and heavier.
Yeah.
You know, you think about if you hold like a weight and you just hold on to it, the longer you hold on to it, the weight doesn't actually change in weight, but it does feel heavier and heavier because it
Yeah.
takes more and more energy to sustain that holding.
Hmm.
And that's what our nervous system does when we don't allow ourselves to process grief or anger or sadness,
Yeah.
when we don't
Yeah.
allow ourselves to feel joy and elation and love and happiness.
Mm.
Instead, we start to narrow this, what we call the window of tolerance. And this
Yeah.
window of tolerance is what we're capable of handling via stress or relaxation. And the narrower, narrower, narrower this window gets, the more triggered we become, or the more difficult it is for us to relax, where
Yeah.
we inevitably find ourselves where just the littlest things set us off. And this
Right.
is where I was when I was converting that school bus. I was in a very narrow window of tolerance.
That makes so much sense. And is there an element of, and I know you kind of touched on this, that we are as a society, often completely disconnected from our bodies?
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
disassociation is 100% the thing. That's why most all of us, and I haven't drank coffee in well over a decade. I haven't drank alcohol in well over a decade. I've the only way that I connect to cannabis anymore is through ceremony, so I don't engage with it on a daily basis anymore. I
Mhm.
truly look at it more as an actual medicine that we can truly connect to spirit in that regard. Every plant
Wow.
has a spirit, and we can go more into that if we want to a little bit later. But to answer your question, this disassociation is continued by our continued need for feeling other than what we actually need to feel. That's why most
Yes.
people feel like in the morning, I have to have that cup of coffee before I can do anything.
Yes.
Well, it's because we're disassociated from our body and our natural energy resources.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Especially in the Northwest.
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh my gosh. So, tell me more about it. You did touch on your training. Tell me more about your certification and training because I understand, I want to say in the last year that you have really pursued that heavily and kind of gotten, I want to say, to be a master of somatic breath work.
Thank you. Yeah. So I went through the 12-week online training, which is something that we still offer. Somatic breathwork is in the process of potentially restructuring that to kind of shorten that time frame, so it's a little bit more accessible for more people that can't, spend every Tuesday and Thursday for 12 weeks learning this modality. There's also a 4-day intensive in-person training that happens in Austin, which is where the corporate headquarters is at. I've experienced both. I have taught both. I've taught the online training much more than I have the in person. I've only helped to assist teaching one of the in person trainings so far. I love the online training because it is a slow titration, it's a slow digestion of all of these materials because we educate on the nervous system. We educate on the relation and somatic understandings of how stress affects our body, how it
Yeah.
triggers our instinctual defense systems, and how some of these defense systems adaptive at one point in time, meaning they helped us through something, they kept us safe, they helped us to find this semblance of self through a very stressful or traumatic time. But if we never change that pattern, eventually that pattern becomes maladaptive because it starts being applied to situations that aren't relevant.
Hmm.
As an example, so to just go into my own story, I grew up with a father who battled with a lot of his own demons and chose to work with those demons through alcoholism. And
Mm.
when he would dive deeply into alcohol, he would become a very rageful individual. And so that really, affected me as a child. I didn't really understand, but it affected me in the long run because it started to create these things within my system and these beliefs within my system that really, really affected how I showed
Yeah.
up as authentically me. I never did. I wore a lot of masks throughout my life. And with this group of friends, I would act one way. With this group of friends, I would act another way. In this professional environment, I would act this way. I would
Yeah.
tailor myself to be exactly what I thought those people wanted me to be
Yeah.
without ever actually being the me I wanted to be.
Hmm.
And that's where breathwork brought me back. It showed me who I wasn't being.
Mm. Yeah, and basically just in the um so you have the ability to survive all these different situations. For me, I can identify because I didn't want to get yelled at. So I
Yeah.
just shrunk as much as I could, and adapted and didn't ask for anything that I need. That's one of my biggest hurdles I've had to overcome. I still deal with it, is not vocalizing what I need. Um, you know, equaling who I am. I mean, I may I may want and desire things that, normal uh success, however you want to say that, other folks don't, and so I didn't want to be scrutinized. But now through this journey I'm on, I'm finding like, oh no, embrace this because, ultimately it's going to help you and help the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you kind of correlate yourself with the term of being a people pleaser?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
so
recovering.
yes, I am also a recovering people pleaser. And one of the things that I realized through one of my breathwork sessions, because I also felt very challenged in asking other people for help. I
Hmm.
will happily help anybody that asks for it or doesn't ask for it. I'm happy to just jump in when I see somebody struggling, and this is something my wife and I have had to work through, of where I just immediately jump in to take over something, and she's like, "I got this. Like I
Yeah.
don't need the help." But in my mind, I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to be there of service. I'm trying to make things easier.
Yeah.
But when we don't ask others for help, we rob them of the opportunity of helping.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk more about that because there is, and I think it also, we could kind of circle it back to, no, I got this. I don't need anyone. I can buy my own lawnmower, you know. Let's circle back to community because we do, as humans, literally need each other.
Yeah.
And I don't know why we're trying to act like we don't.
Well, and the truth is, we are wounded in relation, but we also heal in relation.
Yeah. Ooh, that's powerful.
And so
Wow.
that's why, like, this idea of community or finding your tribe and finding your people is such a popular thing right now, because we're realizing that without community, a lot of us feel lost.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
evolved over thousands and thousands of years in community. That's why
Hmm.
there's that saying, it takes a village to raise a child,
Yeah.
because parents weren't ever meant to just raise the child on their own.
Yes. Yeah.
That child is meant to be served by somebody who is going to be more in alignment with what that child's spirit. And I recently read a book called The Bowl of Like by Hank Wesselman.
Mm.
And he lived in Hawaii for a very long time, so learned a lot from this particular kahuna, which I'll, if you're interested, read the book. I'm not going to, kind of go into all of the details because there's so much wisdom within those pages of that book.
Yeah.
But he speaks to the fact that in indigenous cultures, he's an anthropologist turned shaman. So he's spent time with African indigenous cultures, Amazonian indigenous cultures, Hawaiians and Polynesians. And there was this belief that certain tribes, when someone got pregnant, they would hold a ceremony to connect with the spirit of that child that was going to come in.
Hmm.
And they would ask the question, "Who are you and why are you coming to our tribe?"
Wow.
They would allow the spirit of that child to say, "This is what my mission is. This is what I meant to do." So as soon as that child was born, the tribe already knew who was going to take over the tutelage of that child.
Wow.
So
That's
if
powerful.
if they were meant to come in as a healer, okay, they would immediately start being trained from a very, very early age to be a healer.
Yeah.
Now, this is very different than our Western culture, where we have this belief of you can do whatever you want to do.
Hmm.
And yes, that's a beautiful thing, having the freedom of choice to choose our own destiny and our own path. But I truly believe we all chose the path that we were going to walk before we incarnated into this life. We chose our body, we chose our challenges, we chose the relationships, we chose the parents, we chose our location, we chose
Yeah.
the time in which we would be born. So if
Yeah.
we actually made all of these choices beforehand, we already knew what we came here to do.
Right. And the job is, and you can talk more about this, but the job is to reconnect with what that soul's journey is supposed to
Yeah,
be, that soul contract, right?
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I think back, and when I read this book, I kind of felt a little angry and felt
Mm.
very jealous, wishing that I had been born into a time where I would have actually been placed with the right teachers at a very young age to harness the gifts that I came here with.
Wow.
how
But
how
it,
how many things that I wouldn't have tried or done,
mhm.
instead focusing on mastering that one thing. Now, however, I
Yeah.
am very, very thankful for all of the things that I've experienced in my life. They have literally shaped who I am today, and I would not
Yeah.
be where I am if it wasn't for all of those things. Everything happens the way that it's meant to happen. I truly believe that. But I can't help but to wonder, where would I be now had I received a lot of this tutelage and information earlier in my life? How many more lives could I have changed earlier in my life? How many more lives could I have not hurt earlier in my life had I
Mm.
received some of this information?
I think the way, just knowing you, the way I would take it is, the breadth and the depth, and your age, experience, wisdom, you had to experience all these things to get to that master level of where you are now and share that with everybody. Because I would just for probably 40 years go, why did I, grow up in this family, or why did this happen to me? And then I finally had to say, oh, because I was meant to, go on this journey of healing and share it with everybody. And yes, it took way too long to get there, but here I am now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And I'd like to run with that idea of like asking ourselves why. Because, like, I can't tell you how many times I've asked that same question of myself. Like,
yeah,
why did I have to experience this? Like, even coming back from Peru, and I had to share with my mother of like, I had actually been holding resent for a long time of like, why didn't you leave? Why did you
yeah,
stay and keep us in
yeah.
that situation? But I've recently learned a very awesome technique of instead of asking why, ask how or what.
Ooh, that's powerful.
Instead of why did I have to experience this? What is this experience trying to teach me? How can I
Okay.
use this experience to grow?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
we're all meant to experience the things that we experience, as hard as they are, as challenging as they are, or as bright and beautiful as they are. They
yeah.
are lessons that we are meant to go through. There is always something there. And to rewind to that backpack analogy, like that's the gift
Mm.
of somatic breath work is that in that clearing round, we get to take that backpack off and we get to start pulling those stones out one at a time, looking at them and being like, does this serve? Excuse my language, but F no, you know, throw it
Yeah,
away, throw it out through your breath. But maybe
yeah,
you grab a stone and you're like, you know what? I still haven't learned the lesson from this yet. So let
yeah.
me chisel it down a little bit and find that golden diamond that's inside that holds that lesson. And I'm going to put
Mm.
that back in my backpack because it doesn't weigh nearly as much, but it's really beautiful that the lesson that's still there for me.
Yes. Yeah, that is really powerful. Like all these things, inevitably everybody goes through challenges and they're all going to be of varying degrees, and our reactions are always going to be different, but it really is in what you take from it and how you react to it. And I've noticed through this journey, I could say, oh, I've had a very rough year. I could say that absolutely. But that said, I took a lot of gratitude from it, and I noticed that I'm moving through it a lot quicker than I used to. I used to get stuck at the bottom, and now I'm able to bounce back a little bit quicker than I was before.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's interesting that you say that because it's like that thought of, the healing journey being like this linear line, right? Like we
yeah,
go down to the bottom and then we come up to the top and then we go down to the bottom and we come up at the top. But it's
yeah.
actually a spiral.
Ooh,
And so as we're on this journey, we are spiraling up. And think about this as like an inverted spiral, right? It's bigger at
yeah.
the bottom and smaller at the top. So the
Oh,
higher and higher up we go in that spiral, like, yes, we might spiral back down, but the more that we grow, again, the higher we go up in that spiral,
yeah.
the less time it takes for us to move back up that spiral again. And sometimes we go all the way back down to the bottom, and it feels like it takes forever for us to grow and get back to the point where we were before. But again, the higher up we go, the less time it takes to get back to where we were before.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That absolutely makes sense. I like that idea because I'm a visual person, so I do see it as a up and down, good and bad, but a spiral, that makes sense. And it just, I can't help but think of like wine, and a corkscrew and all of those things. Um, while we're here, I want to touch on um basically what does a session look like if somebody were to work with you?
Yeah. So There's three different session types that I work with. The first one's called the daily practice, and that's anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes. So it's a very short period of time. And we have one round of clearing where we're going to be activating our sympathetic nervous system. And we do this by breathing in and out of our mouth, bringing the breath deeply into our belly, and keeping the breath in a circular fashion. So we're always breathing in or always breathing out. Kind of sounds a little something like this. And for each person, that pace may be a little bit different. You know, the physiology of our body is all in a different place. So for some people, your pace may be that fast. It may be a little bit slower. It may be a little bit faster. The speed of the breath isn't the important thing. The important thing is the depth of the breath. The deeper you
Mm,
bring the breath, the deeper you're going to go into that subconscious and sympathetic nervous system.
okay.
So then we take a breath hold after we've gone through, a couple of minutes of that breathing. And in that breath hold, I typically will ask people to either connect with how they want to feel, connect to where they're holding stress in their body, connect to maybe their higher self or a message that their higher self has for them. And then we shift phase into this remembering phase where we switch to breathing in through the nose and out through the nose or mouth, still keeping it in that circular fashion, still bringing it deeply into the belly, but we're really slowing the breath down. And this triggers the parasympathetic side of the nervous system, or the rest and digest side of the nervous system.
Mm,
So the important phase of this is that we are basically swinging the pendulum from one side of the nervous system to the other side. In essence, it's like hitting the reset button. We're
mhm.
resetting our nervous system, which leads me into the next type of session that we can do, and that's called a reset session, where we have 2 rounds of clearing and 2 rounds of repatterning. And this is anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes long. And then we have my favorite, which is called the full journey length session. And that's an hour long of breathing where we'll do 3 rounds of clearing that are 8 to 10 minutes apiece, and 3 rounds of repatterning that are also 8 to 10 minutes apiece. And this is really like the bread and butter of the overall session, because this is where we have enough time to truly get to the depths. The
Mm,
daily practice is about daily nervous system regulation. It's just about trying to keep us within that window of tolerance. The
yeah.
reset session is where we can take a little bit of time to get a little bit deeper and hit more of that reset button without getting so deep that, we have these big, huge emotional releases where we're, maybe crying, or maybe we're shouting and getting in touch with our
Mm,
anger, or, maybe we're laughing because we tap into joy or inspiration. But the full journey, that's what that session is all about. That session is about true somatic expression. It's
mm,
about tapping into these emotions that maybe we haven't felt in a really long time that really want to move through us. It's about creating a safe space for us to feel.
yeah. Hmm.
And
Um,
so, oh yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. I was gonna say, why is it that, I mean, I know the answer to this, but I just want to put it out there. Why is it that we are so disconnected from our breath, and in our culture, we breathe so shallow,
Mm,
all day, every day?
yeah. I like to call it high and tight. When you're stuck
Mm,
up in the chest, you're not actually feeling the full depth of your breath.
yeah,
When we are actually truly breathing deeply, we're using our diaphragm to move that breath. And that's
yeah,
bringing us that breath all the way from the top of the lungs down through our heart center and down into our solar plexus, that place of power within ourselves, which is
yeah.
also the place of our own identity.
Mm,
In Chinese medicine, they call it the lower dantian. It's the place where they believe that we have this lower dantian at the bottom of the diaphragm, and then we have the upper dantian that's at the heart. Now,
yeah.
what's funny is that in actual like neuroscience, when you're looking at the neurological connections between the brain, the heart, and the gut, there are more connections in the gut and the heart than there are in the brain.
Oh, wow. And we tend to live up here in the
Exactly.
brain, and we say, I'm gonna think about that. And I've started to say, I'm gonna how do I'm get something about my gut, or talk to the angels, but
Yeah.
I'm trying not to think about it. I'm trying to feel about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really like modern medicine and modern psychiatry. It's this top-down approach, right? Like
Hmm.
talk therapy. We're going to talk about it. We're going to
Yes.
analyze the story. We're going to go through that traumatic instance. Maybe we'll get to the emotions that are coming up, but we never get to the body.
Never get to the solar plexus ever. It's all up here. So we never, even touch on those blockages in the body.
We never
That's
get to
so
the root.
Yes, exactly. We never get to the root. We just keep replaying and I'm all about talk therapy. I've done it many years,
Yeah,
but you just keep replaying those traumatic experiences over and over and over instead of moving them through your body and
yeah.
going through that so you can get to the other side.
Yeah. So in somatic breath work, it's this bottom up approach where we're
Mm,
focusing on the body first, and
hmm.
then we're focusing on the emotional expressions that need to move through. And in
Wow.
the session, we're never trying to analyze what's coming up.
Hmm.
We're not
Yeah.
trying to say, well, why am I feeling angry right now? Why am I doing this? No, you're feeling angry because you have anger in your system that's wanting to move through you. It's coming
Yes.
up because your body's saying, I am sick and tired of holding this.
Ooh, that's powerful.
And so when we can allow ourselves this full permission to express this out, people always talk about how, like, when they clear somatically, they also clear mentally.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
when you let go of all of this extra energy that is having to hold on to these things that you haven't allowed yourself to feel, you haven't allowed these
Yes.
processes to come to full completion, when you allow that completion to happen, all of a sudden you have so much more energy at your disposal.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
this extra energy of being connected to your gut, being connected to your heart, now frees up the mind to do what it actually is best at doing.
Hmm. Yeah, which is, enjoying and, moving you through the world in the moment and not worrying so much about the past and the future and all of the things that aren't in front of us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the truth is, and they say depression is when you're stuck in the past,
Yeah.
anxiety is when you're stuck in the future, but
Yeah.
peace is here in the present.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Oh, I could talk to you all day. Um, I want to just really quickly ask you. I have two major questions. One is, what is your dream? What is next for you and your family?
So, my dream is to continue to move down the path of teaching. I
Hmm.
love holding these sessions, but I can only hold so many sessions.
Yeah,
And I truly believe that this work will change the world. And so the way that I can create the most impact is by teaching more and more people how to do this.
that's
Because the more
beautiful.
breathwork practitioners that there are, and like, I, you know, there's now, I believe, 10 or 12 of us here in the Seattle area. We've trained over 2,000 breathwork practitioners over the last 3 years. And
Wow.
I believe in over 17 different countries around the world. So there are more and more of us out there. And I've had somebody recently talk to me, well, aren't you afraid of like training more people in your area to do this, that you're going to lose business? And I'm like, no, I
Never.
want that
Yeah.
because so many people need this. And again, I can only hold so many sessions. I can only touch so many people.
Yep.
But if I can teach 100 different people to do this, there's this saying that each of us will encounter 1,000 people within our lifetime. Well, if I can teach 1,000 other people to do this, well, there's a million other people that I can now touch.
Yes, that goes back to the competition versus cooperation thing, and
Exactly.
it's really important because it's not about scarcity. There's enough to go around. Think about and you could speak to this, how many firefighters, nurse practitioners, caretakers specifically that would need breath work in order to survive and not get sick and die.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, and breathwork is one of those tools that it's the beautiful thing about it is that you don't have another substance entering into your body.
Yeah.
Every time you connect with a substance, that substance has its own agenda for you. it's going to take you for a ride.
Oh,
Whereas
wow.
in breath work, you have your foot on the gas. You get to choose how fast or slow you go based upon the pattern of your breath. So
Yeah.
there's nothing else within your system except for you and the
Hmm.
natural thing that you do from the very first time you enter into this world.
And it's not a pill. It's not a liquid. It's oxygen, which we have to intake anyway.
Yeah,
So it's just letting your body do what it does best, really.
exactly. Exactly.
Ugh. And the oxygen piece, like I suffered from mild sleep apnea for years and years, most of my life, and not getting that oxygen literally to my brain. And then the stark contrast of feeling a breathwork session and that amazing hit of oxygen and the clarity it can bring.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
I had a session with one of my clients yesterday, and she's been suffering from the flu.
Mm.
And even at the beginning of her call, like she still, I could hear was a little bit congested and things like that. And we didn't take her through a full breathwork session, but I utilized one of my other modalities that I use, which still, all the modalities that I use inherently use the breath. I mean, any modality that you are using, you are a breath worker,
Yeah.
regardless of what it is that you're using. But at the end of it, she's like, oh my gosh, I can actually breathe deeper now.
Oh,
The congestion was completely gone. You could see that the little bit of like fever that was still there, the kind of like the flushness in her face, that had
yeah.
completely disappeared. She was back to normal coloring. Like being able to see somebody shift in the matter of an hour is
Yeah.
such a gift.
Yeah. And we could talk about, I mean, for all the folks, there's that book Breath by James Nestor,
Hmm.
talking about how we've evolved, to we don't have to chew as much as we used to, and so our skulls have regressed a little bit. So our sinuses, that's why we get sinus infections. There's the asthma, just all those things where, like my jaw wasn't forward enough, there's a reason because this is how we've evolved, and these are new things that have happened as as we've evolved. And so this is where breathwork can come in and sort of
Yeah.
reteach us how to breathe, literally.
Well, and we can talk to the science of that here for a second, because when we are stuck in the sympathetic nervous system, we inherently will mouth breathe. Like if you think
Yes.
about when something is chasing you, when you are running, you are mouth breathing because you're
Hmm.
trying to get as much oxygen and in and as much carbon dioxide out as quickly as you can. So it's these
Yeah.
big gulps of breath. The parasympathetic, on the other hand, is triggered by nasal breathing. They're smaller pathways, so it takes longer for the air to come in and longer for the air to go out. It's a slower process.
Yes.
Inherently, by being a slower process, it slows everything else down. So, I used to work in sales, and when I was working in the sales job, I was commission only. So when I was on a lunch break and I wasn't on the floor, I wasn't making any money. So I would eat as fast as I could possibly eat. This led to eating while being sympathetically triggered.
Yep.
Well, when we are sympathetically triggered, our digestive system shuts off. And
Hmm.
when our digestive system shuts off, yes, food is still going to move through, but it's not going to be pulling the nutrition out of that food that it is meant to. So
Yeah.
I really focus before I'm eating, taking a couple of deep nasal breaths,
Ah.
triggering my parasympathetic, the rest and digest of the
Yeah.
nervous system, so that as I am eating this food, trying to chew it as many times as possible. They say you're supposed to chew your food 33 times in order to get the maximum benefit out of it.
Yeah.
So that as I'm eating it, it's nourishing my body in the exact way that it's meant to, not
Mm.
in and out as quickly as possible, because that's what our body does when it's stuck in the sympathetic. And that's the
Yeah.
beauty of breath work. It helps to reset our nervous system. It helps to create regulation within the nervous system. So we can
And
begin to sense when we're in that sympathetic versus when we're in the parasympathetic.
Yeah, and we, tend to, or even I can speak to myself, live in fight or flight because I would mouth breathe at night and all day long, or when I'm exercising. And when you nasal breathe, you get the benefits of the extra filtration, so you don't
Hmm.
get sick.
Yeah.
There's just
Yeah.
so many benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I could nerd out on this all day
Yeah.
because, there's different benefits of nasal breathing, of triggering more nitric oxide into the
Yep.
system that is very, very beneficial. And you can just Google search that and look at all of this different science and research that's been done around that. So that's why a lot of people start taping their mouths at night so that it really focuses them and forces them to nasal breathe. And this will
Yes.
completely change your sleeping. It most of the time stops people from having that sleep apnea and
Yes.
having that, snoring issues, which, inherently when you're doing that, you're not entering that deep REM sleep. So if
Mhm.
you yourself, like if you don't dream a lot, if you don't ever feel restful, maybe start taping your mouth at night and see if that changes things.
Yeah, and everybody listening, it does sound weird, but it really does work, and I would recommend it for everybody. It is really important to
Yeah.
pay attention to your sleep health and breathing, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of I could talk to you all day, but we're gonna kind of wrap up. I wanted to ask you, is is there anything else that you would like the listeners to know?
So this is a message that I recently posted on my Instagram that came through me after I taught class on Tuesday. And the message was that many of us, I'm a recovering perfectionist as well, and many of us will constantly try and redo things if it's not perfect, or not even do something if we can't get it perfect the right time.
Mm.
And I have tattooed on my wrist, perfectius imperfectus, perfectly
Oh,
imperfect. This was a message that I received during my Reiki master's training in 2016. And it's really the message that we can try as hard as we want to be perfect, but we will never achieve perfection because we were never meant to achieve perfection. We were meant to accept ourselves in our imperfection, recognizing through that imperfection, you are perfect.
mm,
But you will never be more perfect than being your true, authentic self. So
mhm.
stop wearing the masks, stop changing who you are to appease other people, and just be who you were meant to be.
And enjoy that journey of finding. Yeah, there's no mountain to climb. It's literally that hike that is what it's all about.
And honestly, I believe to give a slight perspective shift, it's not about finding, it's
Yeah.
about uncovering, it's about
Mm,
remembering.
yeah.
Because when you were first born, you were more authentically you than you've ever been. It's
Yeah.
about getting back to that person that has just been covered up by all of the other stressful and traumatic shit that we've encountered in life.
Yes, yes. And just understanding that that is um the facade and the lie and the truth is inside of you. So everybody needs to go on a quest. If you haven't done so, it's well worth it. It will change your life in the best way and
Yeah,
elongate
yeah.
it. Um, where can people find you in order to take classes or work with you one-on-one?
Yeah, so if you want to follow my journey, you can find me on Instagram at adam.carbary, C-A-R-B as in boy, A-R-Y. Or you can head over to my website, embraceandexpand.com. There you'll find on the very first page all of our upcoming events. You'll find a tab where you can see all of my different offerings, one-on-one breath work, one-on-one coaching, Reiki sessions. You can also do cacao sessions virtually with my wife. We do have a tab where we'll start offering retreats, which is one of our goals here for 2025 of having some half day, full day, and longer day retreats. And then also, if you go onto that website, again, in embraceandexpand.com, there will be a pop-up window that pops up for a free download of a somatic breathwork daily practice. You
Wow.
only have to enter in your email address, which then puts you onto our newsletter list, so you are notified when we have upcoming events and different offerings of that sort. But that is my free gift to you, to have a
Mm,
daily practice that you can come to time and time again to help you to find that window of tolerance within yourself.
wow. That's amazing. And as always, I'll put all of this in the show notes. Adam, I just want to thank you for being here today. And I definitely would love to talk to you again. And I want to learn more about cacao, and there's so many things. Um, but I'm just really grateful that you were here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'd love to jump on again and we can, open up into different conversations, talking about like energy medicine and plant medicine and
Yeah.
things like that. I mean, many different ways that we can take this conversation.
Yes, I would love that. I would love that. Well, thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm so grateful you were able to join us today. Please share and like and review this podcast. Also, if you have any comments or questions about anything, I would love to hear from you. You can reach me at juliettericci@gmail.com, and info is in the show notes. Till next time, have a great week.